The narrative commences with a man named Gilbert who appears in court for a hearing. He has engaged in fraud involving bank checks, resulting in a sentence of 18 months in prison. Gilbert is incarcerated, but merely 6 months later, he escapes and crosses the border into Canada. Upon arriving in Canada, he seeks employment selling ice cream. However, before he can secure the position, he is required to present his identity card. Lacking such a card, Gilbert walks away in frustration. While on the road, he encounters a beggar. Gilbert purchases the beggar's identity card for $20. Henceforth, he adopts the name Robert and presents the ID to the ice cream vendor. That evening, he arrives at a shelter that provides lodging for travelers from distant locations. After knocking on the door multiple times, a girl named Andrea answers it. Gilbert spends the night there. The following morning, he begins selling ice cream and starts to earn an income. Yet, it seems his fortune is ill-fated, as the ice cream company soon declares bankruptcy. To alleviate his sorrows, Gilbert visits a bar to drink. The bar is owned by a gangster named Tommy, a man whom the police are also pursuing, although they lack substantial evidence against him. As he exits the bar, Gilbert inadvertently collides with a police officer named John, who is actually present to surveil Tommy. Back at home, Gilbert invites Andrea out on a date. Before long, romance flourishes between them, and they begin cohabiting. One day, upon returning home, he discovers in the newspaper that the American government is exerting every effort to locate him. Gilbert feels anxious and resolves to reveal the truth to Andrea. Meanwhile, Andrea is in the washroom and suddenly her face brightens as she realizes she is going to become the mother of Gilbert's child. She steps out, eager to share the wonderful news. However, before she has the chance, Gilbert informs her that he is leaving for a few days on business. Shortly thereafter, Gilbert arrives in Vancouver to mislead the police and once again begins his search for employment. Yet, no one is willing to hire him. Then, unexpectedly, he notices two men unloading cash from a truck and transporting it into a bank. At that moment, an idea strikes him. Simultaneously, he discovers that Andrea is pregnant, and this news only fortifies his determination. Gilbert promptly enters the bank. He meticulously scans the environment, taking note of every detail. Subsequently, he visits a shop, pretends to be an actor, and purchases a few costumes for disguises. Soon, he adorns himself as a security guard and re-enters the bank. This time, he meets the bank manager under the pretense of conducting a security inspection. He even sneaks into the camera server room and gathers all the information he requires. Meanwhile, he also masters the skill of altering his appearance using silicone skin and successfully steals a silicone nose. Finally, the day of the heist arrives. Gilbert, in disguise, walks into the bank to execute his very first robbery. He approaches the clerk's desk and discreetly hands her a note that reads, "Don't scream." Then, revealing the gun concealed in his pocket, he commands her to hand over all the money. Terrified, the clerk complies and gives him the cash, but Gilbert has no place to store it. Therefore, the clerk stuffs the money into her purse and hands it to him. At that moment, Gilbert's fake nose begins to peel off, threatening to reveal his identity. Somehow, he manages to reattach it just in time. Once the job is completed, he returns the costumes to the shop and hides all the cash in a suitcase. He hurries to the airport, but there a new problem awaits. He realizes the suitcase will undergo an X-ray check and the money will be uncovered. In a state of desperation, he conceals some of the bills within his underwear and proceeds back to the security checkpoint. Shortly thereafter, he discovers that domestic flights are not subjected to X-ray scans. Upon finally returning home, Andrea awaits him with anticipation in her eyes. They transition into their new residence, which Gilbert had purchased only a short time prior. However, once again, he refrains from disclosing the truth to Andrea. Instead, he fabricates a story, asserting that he is managing his family business. Meanwhile, the police initiate their investigation into the robbery. Detective Hoffman harbors suspicions that the gangster Tommy is involved. Conversely, Officer John informs the police commander that Tommy should be apprehended and requests authorization to arrest him. Yet again, the police lack substantial evidence. Consequently, John must conduct his own investigation to reveal the truth. In the meantime, Gilbert requires additional funds to execute larger heists. Thus, he visits Tommy's bar to confer with him. Indicating the bank situated across the street, Gilbert claims he can rob it in merely 3 minutes. Should he succeed, Tommy is to provide him with a $10,000 loan, which Gilbert vows to repay within 5 months. Tommy consents. Shortly thereafter, Gilbert disguises himself as a worker, infiltrates the bank, and within 3 minutes, emerges through the back door of the bar with the stolen money. Tommy is left in shock. From that point forward, Gilbert continues to rob banks, altering his disguise each time. After each heist, he escapes on a domestic flight to another city to avoid capture. This ingenious tactic earns him the moniker, the Flying Bandit. By this stage, he has successfully robbed approximately 36 banks. He amasses such wealth that he acquires several luxury vehicles and high-end watches, while securing the remainder of the cash in his vault. Soon, he starts socializing with the affluent. After repaying Tommy's loan, Tommy presents him with a new target, a jewelry store. However, John remains resolute in his pursuit of Tommy. He designates his operation as Project Cafe, and his team begins to monitor Tommy's every action and meeting. John initially devises a strategy to apprehend Tommy's loyal associates, Bishop and David. They possess photographs of Gilbert, yet they remain unaware of his true identity. At home, Gilbert is taken by surprise when Andrea unexpectedly enters his room. A heap of money is strewn across the bed. Andrea insists on knowing the source of this money. Gilbert ultimately reveals to her that he commits bank robberies. Shocked, Andrea demands that he demonstrate that he has never harmed anyone during his criminal activities. The following morning, Gilbert takes Andrea along with him. Right before her eyes, he executes a bank robbery. Andrea is left in awe, amazed by his proficiency. In a matter of moments, Gilbert hands the stolen money to Andrea. Back at home, Andrea compels Gilbert to vow that he will never be apprehended and that he will eventually abandon this lifestyle. Meanwhile, outside Tommy's bar, John maintains a vigilant watch. Gilbert arrives to meet Tommy, and together they commence planning another heist. This time, Tommy instructs Bishop to accompany Gilbert during the robbery. Shortly thereafter, when Gilbert steps into the restroom, John enters. He cautions Tommy that an arrest warrant will soon be issued against him. Upon spotting Gilbert, John becomes suspicious, noticing that Gilbert still has remnants of silicone on his face. Later, John starts contacting all the costume shops in the city for further investigation. That night, he unexpectedly receives an urgent call from the police station. They have detained a man for driving under the influence, and this man turns out to be none other than Tommy's loyal henchman, David. Under pressure, David discloses all pertinent information regarding Gilbert. He informs them that Gilbert has been living under a false identity as Robert and that he himself is the notorious Flying Bandit. David further reveals that Gilbert is in the process of planning a significant heist. Armed with this intelligence, John hurries to the site of the robbery, eager to finally solve the case. He begins by interrogating the shopkeeper who provides Gilbert with his disguises. Subsequently, he notifies the local police, cautioning them that a robbery is imminent today. Soon, police officers are positioned outside every bank throughout the city. Meanwhile, Gilbert and Bishop disguise themselves as camera repair technicians and commence their activities, completely oblivious to the fact that the police are already monitoring them. Gilbert enters the jewelry store and instructs the shopkeeper to fill a bag with all the jewels. Bishop stands guard at the entrance until he suddenly notices John approaching. In a state of panic, they flee, narrowly avoiding the police's gaze. However, in their haste, Bishop inadvertently leaves his weapon behind in the store. The police continue their pursuit, but due to the thieves' ordinary clothing, it becomes challenging to identify them. Nevertheless, John demonstrates his cleverness. He abruptly activates the fire alarm, resulting in chaos erupting in the mall. People panic and scatter in all directions. Amidst the commotion, he spots Gilbert and Bishop, promptly dispatching his men to pursue them. Ultimately, however, both manage to outwit John and escape. Later, Gilbert contacts Andrea and instructs her to pack their belongings. They are departing tonight. Meanwhile, Bishop returns to Tommy's bar. Upon Gilbert's arrival home, he discovers Andrea doubled over in pain. The baby is about to arrive. Without delay, Gilbert rushes her to the hospital, where Andrea gives birth to a baby boy. Concurrently, the police conduct a raid on Gilbert's residence, but it is vacant. As clever as ever, Gilbert has already relocated to another location with Tommy's assistance. Meanwhile, the police initiate an investigation into the weapon that was left behind in the shop. Far away, Gilbert is occupied with raising his child. Life appears to be more tranquil, and Andrea finds herself pregnant once more. Then, one day, Tommy unexpectedly visits Gilbert. He inquires about future plans, expressing his desire for Gilbert to execute another robbery, but Gilbert declines. After Tommy departs, Gilbert reviews his savings and discovers that the money is nearly depleted. Nevertheless, Andrea forbids him from stealing again. The very next morning, while Andrea remains asleep, Gilbert quietly composes a farewell note and exits the house. Upon waking, Andrea realizes he is missing. At that moment, the phone rings. It is John, asking if Gilbert is at home. Andrea informs him that he is not. John promptly reaches out to all the airports, but there are no leads. By chance, he notices an advertisement in the newspaper for an airline they had previously overlooked. The team swiftly begins to investigate that flight. Meanwhile, Gilbert is in a hotel room, making preparations for his plan. Suddenly, Andrea calls again. Gilbert deceives her, instructing her to meet him at the airport at 5 p.m. Following that, he disguises himself as before, robs a bank, and fills his bag with cash. However, as soon as he exits, he changes clothes with another individual, leading the police to apprehend that man instead. Seizing the opportunity, Gilbert escapes. He signals for a taxi, but none are available. The police have intentionally cleared all the cabs from the vicinity. Just then, Gilbert notices a car for sale. He quickly purchases it and drives away. Shortly thereafter, John arrives at the bank, showing everyone Gilbert's photograph. A police officer mentions that he witnessed Gilbert fleeing in a car. In the meantime, Gilbert arrives at the airport, clears security, and proceeds forward. However, by this time, the news of his escape has reached the airport personnel. They promptly notify John, who instructs them to prevent Gilbert's flight from taking off. Hoffman, on the other hand, proposes a more strategic approach. They should wait until the plane lands and apprehend him then. Consequently, John and Hoffman commence tracking the flight via helicopter. When the plane eventually lands, Gilbert exits to discover Andrea waiting for him. But in a flash, police vehicles encircle them from all directions. Gilbert is taken into custody immediately. John begins to interrogate him while Andrea seethes with rage. She had cautioned him never to commit theft again, yet he chose to disregard her warning. Now she finds out that she does not even know his true identity. Enraged and feeling betrayed, Andrea files for divorce. Later, Tommy visits Gilbert. With a malicious grin, he discloses that he himself provided testimony against Gilbert to the authorities. Ultimately, Gilbert is sentenced to 20 years in prison for robbing 59 banks. The narrative concludes here.